I am Roy McTaggart, Leader of the Opposition and the political leader of the Progressives Party. On behalf of my Progressive and Alliance colleagues, I want to send a huge thank you to the people of the Cayman Islands for participating in the recent general election. Joining me this afternoon are my colleagues, Joseph Pugh, Deputy Leader of the Opposition and Member of Parliament for Georgetown North, Alden McLaughlin, Member of Parliament for Red Bay, Dwayne Seymour, Member of Parliament for Bodentown East, and Barbara Conolly, Member of Parliament for Georgetown South. I offer apologies for Moses Connell, who is a Member of Parliament for Kimmenbrack West and Little Cayman, who is in Kimmenbrack and could not be here today, and David White, Member of Parliament for Georgetown West, who had to travel to the United States to be with a family member who is undergoing surgery overseas. I start this afternoon by addressing you on several matters, and then at the conclusion we'll invite you to ask questions. First matter I wanted to address is the opposition caucus. The Progressives and the Alliance opposition team have been meeting regularly over the past few weeks in caucus to develop our plans and to organize ourselves. We take our role in the opposition very seriously and commit to serving the people of these islands as a check on the government. We will be fair but robust and effective opposition, supporting the government in the policies and projects that we believe are in the best interest of our people and the country, but challenging those that we do not believe to be in the country's best interest. This is an important part of the democratic process. We in the opposition are united in purpose and united around the shared vision for Cayman that we ran on during the election, and that is contained in our election manifesto entitled A Stronger, Safer Future. As the opposition, we will continue to work to seek to ensure that the government's actions do lead to a stronger, safer Cayman Islands. We have a lot of work to do. And so in the weeks and months to come, we will provide the public and the media with additional information as our plans develop. Let me turn now to shadow ministers. And what I can share with you today is that we have agreed the subjects that we will each take on as shadow ministers. You will note when I read the list out that we have not attempted to utilize all the subject names specifically used by the government in naming their ministries, but the public and media will readily understand what it is that each of us are taking responsibility for. The shadow cabinet of the official opposition will comprise myself, Roy McTaggart as leader of the opposition and shadow minister for finance, economic development and infrastructure, Joey Hugh, deputy leader of the opposition and shadow minister for commerce and the environment, transport, planning and lands, Alden McLaughlin, shadow minister for financial services, international trade and investment and agriculture, Moses Connell, shadow minister for tourism, district administration and e-government and innovation, Dwayne Seymour, shadow minister for health, housing, culture and heritage and home affairs, Barbara Conolly, shadow minister for education and social development, and David White, shadow minister for youth, sports and labor. Let me turn my attention next to the recent government press briefing. I welcomed the government's press briefing last week. In particular, we in the opposition were heartened to hear that the government intends to follow, at least for the time being, the sensible border reopening policies that we established when we were in government. We believe, and I suspect that the Chief Medical Officer might support us in this, that we need to have 75 to 80% of people fully vaccinated before any widespread border opening should take place. Certainly, 80% is preferred. The concern we have is in the new strains of the virus that we see developing in different parts of the world, and we need to tread carefully so that we avoid the pitfalls that have occurred in other places that have had to reintroduce lockdowns and social distancing many times. We shall watch carefully what the government does going forward. I do applaud the Premier for convincing his ministers who have not been vaccinated to go ahead and do so. It is important that leaders lead by example. I again join the chorus with our people to utilize the opportunity that we have been given and to get vaccinated over the course of the next few weeks. We cannot allow these vaccinations to go to waste while so many in the world cannot even get access to them. I was also heartened to hear the government acknowledge that despite the challenges of COVID and the continuing border closures, the country's finances are in a very good place with substantial reserves and an exceedingly low debt to GDP ratio. This speaks extremely well for how successfully the Progressives-led coalition government guided the country through the pandemic and our excellent stewardship of the economy and government finances over 2 consecutive terms, including the stimulus measures in the early days of the lockdown. This is what has allowed us and is still continuing to allow us to keep the borders closed so as to keep the virus out and also provide assistance to our people. Happily, the government has confirmed that they will now keep the $1,500 stipend to tourism workers in place. The government should be considering increasing this to $2,000 as soon as they are able to do this. In closing, on behalf of my Progressive and Alliance colleagues, I want to send a huge thank you to the people of the Cayman Islands for participating in the general elections last month. Exercising your vote is an important part of our democracy. As I mentioned recently, I took an interest in politics at a very early age of 17, so I was particularly heartened in this election cycle to see the number of new young voters who participated in the election. I hope that they will remain engaged in the political process. I want to again thank our supporters and well-wishers and all those who voted and overwhelmingly re-elected Joey, Alden, Moses, Barbara, Dwayne, David, and myself. I again wish the very best to our colleagues, Austin Harris, Alva Saku, Frank Cornwall, and Vincent Frederick, who regrettably were not elected, but who all had and ran clean campaigns and showed the country their strength and ability by running for office and offering their services. We wish them the absolute best in their future endeavors. I thank you, and I will now open it up for questions from the press.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all.
Is the microphone?
Oh, I have to go to the mic.
Yes, please.
Stand and right.
We
Can't
are
stand
live
and right.
streaming.
Can't stand and right. Do my best. First of all,
Put a seat. Pull the mic down.
thank you. That works. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Thanks. First of all, can I ask you how you all feel about the departure of Juliana Conolly?
Well, I think we wish her well in her continuing role as Minister of Education. I would say, from my perspective, I feel she's the best person to lead that department. She has a wealth of experience that she has brought, that she has given them and brought to the leadership there and to the Ministry of Education and the other subject matters that she has retained.
How do you feel about it from a party perspective, as she was a fairly long-standing member now?
Well, it's never a happy occasion to lose a member. To my knowledge, she has not yet resigned or has not resigned as a member of the Progressives. And so she, as far as we're concerned, she's a member here, and we will remain in contact with her during that time as well, during her time there as well.
So in theory, she could caucus with you?
I think it would be to prove maybe a bit challenging if she's caucusing with the current government and us, but I guess from a practical or theoretical standpoint, that's possible.
Talking of party, it always has been an issue with the party v independence, and you've perhaps suffered the most from it at this election, being the only clearly defined group facing almost a point of where the independents came together as another party, despite not having the same platform. Do you feel it's now time to really emphasise parties and perhaps for Mr Seymour to join the PPM and remove this grey area of where people's loyalties actually lie?
Well, I mean, I think that the progressives we would always welcome, and we would welcome, they not necessarily put the Mr Seymour in any pressure, but we would welcome him as a member of the Progressives family, and others as well of the independents who did not necessarily, did not win a seat. We're always seeking new membership and new blood, and we would welcome new members.
Mr Seymour?
Well, thank you. Obviously, I ran on the platform that that the constituents of Town East approved for me back in 2017, and hence the reason why I'm still here. This is what they approved me to do, to align with the progressives, and the reason why I'm still here as a part of this group in the opposition. Many may have said that I had opportunities to join the independents, and that I should have moved away and joined the independents when they called on me to do so privately. But I say to them that we always, as a group, had most of the negotiations after the election. We always had 9. They had 8, and then there was a group that had 2. So that the negotiations took place straight up until the day before swearing in, and obviously the independents, they formed the government by putting more together than we could, and of course I would have loved to be a minister and continue the good works that this alliance and the progressives were doing, but this is politics, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. The opposition role, as we investigate it now in terms of the Constitution and otherwise, has a very important role, and we hope to play that as best as we can. We're not going to be, or certainly me, I'm not going to be opposing for opposing's sake. If something is good for the country, I will go along with it. I don't think that anyone wakes up at any morning saying, I want to destroy the Cayman Islands. And I think that we are all fine 19 members who have sacrificed ourselves to represent this country, because it is a sacrifice. And that's really my position.
And just clarify then, that's a no on you joining the progressives?
That's not a no. I will be led by my constituency, as I did before. If I did anything other than go to them first, but I must say this is the place where they told me to be, and they haven't told me not to be here yet. so
Okay.
I'm working for them, and whatever they tell me, if they tell me I got to move, then that's what I have to do. But they haven't said so, and they seem very comfortable with the decision I made.
Can I ask you all, there was a lot of allegations made post election day that there was pressure coming from, misinformation coming between the two groups that were negotiating, but also, more importantly, pressure came from donors, and it was certainly implied that the donors were your donors, that they were your supporters that were putting pressure on the independents to break the original 10. So can you speak to that and confirm or deny whether you feel that any of your supporters or donors were involved in skullduggery behind the scenes?
Well, I'm surprised that you say that the inference was that the pressure was coming from our end. In fact, we know the converse to be true. We had arrangements with not 1, not 2, but 4 independents. We assisted them, some of them financially. We assisted them with political advice, and we assisted them by endorsements. So something transpired in the last week or so of the election campaign, because what occurred on election night with most of the independents going into a meeting with Mr. Panton, that plot was not hatched overnight. And so we were blindsided in that respect. So, of course, various people who give support to candidates will call and say, this is the condition on which I supported you, financially or otherwise. You said you were going to work with this group or not going to work with that person, and you've gone back on your word. So I'm sure a lot of that went on from both sides. That is, those people who supported the progressives and those people who supported the independents. What we saw rear its ugly face for the first time in Cayman's political history that I'm aware was the bullying by certain media houses of candidates, and in fact going as far as to go to Isaac Rankin's house in East End and taunt and threaten him. That is something that I hope we never see again, because I've been through, this is 8 political campaigns and the 6th as a candidate. I've never seen that sort of thing occur in the aftermath of an election. Even in the roughest times of trying to put governments together, including the one, my first time being elected in 2000, when we had a very difficult job of trying to put together a government, which only lasted a year. But I saw public meetings and that sort of thing, but I've never seen that level of intimidation, particularly by some in the media. It is something that ought to be discouraged, because it's not good for Cayman, and it's actually, I believe, an impingement upon the choices that elected representatives or candidates elect, or members elect, have to make, and it's just wrong. So thankfully there was no violence, although there was real threats of that at some points. Certainly people I know have felt real fear that bad things were going to happen to them if they did or didn't do certain things. I know 2 of the independent candidates who expressed that fear that something bad would happen to them if they didn't do what Marl Road and others were advocating that they should do. That is, become part of a government of independence rather than join with the progressives. Now the jury is still very, very much out on whether this government can last. We'll see. I certainly do not wish them not to, because that sort of uncertainty is not good for our economy, and we're going through enough challenges as it is. But I know full well what can happen in these things. As I said, when I was first elected in 2000, the government that was cobbled together then lasted 1 year before it fell apart. In my first term as Premier, I lost 3 members, and in my last term, I lost 1. So it is very difficult to keep a group of politicians together, particularly as is the case with the pact government, where they have no common platform, no cohesive set of policies or programs, and most of them are highly inexperienced. But let us pray for the best and for the continued good governance and prosperity of these islands.
Thanks for that. I've just got one final question, which is pretty specific. It's just a speculative thing that's been going around that I've been trying to get some clarification on. When you were minister, Mr. Hugh, when Was there a separate development agreement made with DAR about increasing the height of one of the buildings that they're in the process of building right now? That's at 5 stories that you signed off to go to 7. Are you able to confirm or deny that?
No, there was no separate.
This would have been something that didn't go through CPA.
No, I don't have that power. You wouldn't have the power as a minister to do
So you made no backroom commitments to
No.
them?
You have,
Okay.
you can't do anything that's outside of the law. And this is, when we talk about all of the things to do with planning, the laws are very clear. The responsibilities are very defined between the Central Planning Authority, the department, and the ministry. And the minister certainly wouldn't have those sorts of authority, nor would I ever make those sorts of promises. So everything that was done in planning was done at the Legislative Assembly through the proper channels.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. That's it. Thank you.
I feel like I should be giving a folk concert or something. Good afternoon. Just want to ask, do you guys have any regrets about the campaign that you ran, apart from that it was unsuccessful ultimately?
Personally, I don't really. I think, we planned and we executed the campaign exactly as we wanted and as we had prepared to do. So I did not come away from it with any real regrets about what we did.
I mean, was there any particular areas that you think you should have pressed more heavily upon?
No, I think, all of the key issues that this election was about were all ventilated and I think aired very ably by all members of our team. And so I didn't come away feeling that there was anything significant in terms of that we should have or could have dealt with any differently.
The one thing I will say is that if you look at the results of the election, we ran 8 PPM members and we won, was it 7? Frank was a 7th.
Yeah.
7 PPM members, myself, Mose Colonel, Juliana O'Connor Conolly, Mr. McTaggart, Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. White, and Ms. Connolly, and then Mr. Frank Cornwall was 8, and we won 7 seats as PPM members out of the 8. I think if the one lesson to learn and the one thing that we have to do over the next 4 years is to continue to build the party. We certainly want to enter into the next election, if not with a full slate of candidates contesting every constituency on the 3 islands. We want to at least have 14 or 15 of those contested. That is our goal. That's where we will focus going over the next 4 years or over the next during this term. And if I look back, I'll say yes. Each election that I have been involved with, 2013, 2017, in the spirit of cooperation, we ran less and less party members during that election. And I think now is the time for us to go back and rebuild. And in the next election, we will be running a full slate of candidates.
The one thing I want to touch on is this. The reason for the early elections was the controversy over Mr. Bush and his assault case and his conviction. One of the greatest ironies, I think, political ironies that I've ever seen is that the current premier resigned, at least ostensibly, from the Progressives on the basis that we were unprincipled. I have a long message from him on my phone, which I shall keep forever. And that as a matter of principle, we and particularly me as Premier, ought to have fired Mr. Bush. I explained to him, as I've explained to the country over and over again, the reasons why I did not feel I could properly and safely take that course of action during the pandemic in particular. The House was dissolved because the then opposition, including the now Deputy Premier, Chris Saunders, filed a motion seeking a resolution of no confidence in the Speaker. And rather than allow that process to play out with all of the attendant controversy and bad feelings it would involve, after consultation with my caucus, I took the decision to advise His Excellency to dissolve the House and call early elections. So the elections were called because of the controversy around Mr. Bush's assault conviction. We took a principled position in the aftermath of the elections that we would not go back into government with Mr. Bush. We sought repeatedly to be able to put together a coalition with the PACT group. None of that came to fruition because Mr. Panton took the view that the prize of the premiership was worth him going back on everything he had said and done previously. And lo and behold, we now have Mr. Bush back as Speaker of the House, this time as part of the PACT administration. What is amazing to me is the hypocrisy that has been demonstrated by many, including some in the media, about this. Because what Mr. Bush had done was so despicable that he ought to have been ejected from the Speaker's chair. But now that the Progressives Alliance decided not to go back into government with him, it is seemingly perfectly acceptable for him to be back in the chair to prop up the PACT administration. If that is not hypocritical, then I don't know what could possibly be.
Is this situation going to make it difficult for you to work with the Speaker as the opposition in the House? Are you concerned about any conflicts there?
Not at all. I have a very good personal relationship with McKeever. We spent 3 hours in a meeting with him today as part of the Parliament Management Council. We're trying to get that up and running. So this is nothing. What I'm saying is, please no one interpret it as me having any personal issues with Mark. I am just calling the facts as they are.
Is there any particular areas that you, as the previous government, worked on that you are concerned that the current government might undo some of their work or reverse certain policies that you felt strongly about?
Well, I think, what we said throughout the campaign, the two big issues facing the Cayman Islands. One is the vaccination program, which we see them really, pushing forward with as well, and supporting that and encouraging everyone to get it. I think that has to be the biggest effort right now, and they seem to be, they are on board with that. The question, the biggest issue was the safe reopening, and how does that play out in the months ahead of us. I think we are hearing more and more that there will be reopening, but what seems to be lacking right now are what are the real plans? How do we take? What steps do we take? And where do we need to really get to in order to make that happen? So that, I think, is a concern for us.
I have a few from my ministry and my work. There were some tremendous efforts made, some tremendous strides made, especially recommendations coming out of the SEAT committee that I formed after the shelter-in-place period of COVID. One would be the digital IDs. I hope that continues. We were at the point where those could be issued as early as this summer. That's a national ID program, both electronic and digital signatures. That is a gateway for our e-government, and both through government and for the private sector. That platform will provide the opportunity for the private sector to build on that. Also, the efforts made to start moving towards the introduction of a third state-of-the-art fiber optic cable, modern fiber optic cable. Again, another integral part of our future growth as in fintech, in other areas of technology, as these industries evolve and we look to diverse our economy. And also, despite the accusations made by some of the media on Plan Cayman and what Plan Cayman represents, this is the first real chance that we've had to review our national development plan since 1997. The tagline on that plan reads, "Your plan, your future," and all residents in the Cayman Islands are invited to contribute to this process. We had the national planning framework, which we did just prior to the COVID. We had over 2,000 comments and 356 respondents on that exercise, which produced the national planning framework. We are expecting, or would expect going forward, there's 5 planned areas. The Grand Cayman was divided up into 5 planned areas. There would be consultation on each planned area. There was concerns that the plan wouldn't cover beach access. The plan is, and the framework is very extensive. Page 80 beach accesses are clearly identified as a frustrating issue and sets out several goals to address it. Setbacks are addressed in that area, defined parks, green areas, and walkways, etc., also covered in that framework. And we also introduced we took a holistic approach to climate change, and that starts from goal 9.2, which outlines coastal zone management, setbacks, etc. So it's a very comprehensive framework that we have for the review of the National Development Plan. And I hope that the new government takes the opportunity, as it is ready for public consultation on the first area, being the 7 Mile Beach, which is showing the fastest rate of growth at the moment. And it's just a real good opportunity for us to have public consultation, public input, a plan that the entire country can participate in, and our first real opportunity to review the National Development Plan after 24 years. So those are just a couple of things from my ministry that I hope we will see come to fruition in the very near future.
I just wanted to mention a few from my ministry, if I may, in terms of there was some work ongoing that nearly finished. The marine parks expansion, which hadn't been amended since 1986. We were able to do so as a government, and the spear gun amendments that we were able to get through. I hope they continue with those efforts, as many Caymanians are waiting on these approvals. Also, the mini hospital in Bordentown that most of Parliament approved and Cabinet. Also, for the good of the eastern districts in terms of North Side, East End, and Bordentown, the East-West Arterial Road, we pray that continues, because that's key to improving the quality of life in terms of the eastern district residents. Also, the purchasing of land for affordable housing that we announced. We started that. We bought 25 acres in Georgetown and 10 acres in North Side, and the building of homes, affordable homes for different categories in terms of young people who wanted to start homes, and taking it up another notch for persons beyond the affordable but can't just afford the capital to actually outlay it to the bank to get their houses built, but they are in a different category than just the regular salaried employees. but still can't get approvals from the bank. And I think that we need to take it up a notch in terms of the quality of homes that we can provide for Caymanians. Not just affordable, but improve homes.
Yeah, we sat, Mr. Seymour and I sat on a joint committee with a team from the Deputy Governor's Office, and we had several think tanks with the private sector, and we came up with some real solid recommendations on addressing the housing issue. So I hope that I know that team in the Deputy Governor's Office was occupied with travel time, but I do hope that once opportunity allows for them to return to it, that they do follow through on the work started there. And Mr. Seymour mentioned the traffic on the east-west arteria. Again, I want to appeal to the government and to let the public know that our decisions to make improvements to the road to the road framework were not based on political promises or pie-in-the-sky dreams, but we invested in a traffic modeling system. The data was entered into that traffic modeling system, and these were the improvements that the system told us that we needed to make to bring real relief to the motoring public, in particular for those coming from the Eastern District. So this is not just something that we dreamed up or we felt that we wanted to build this road or we think it's a good idea. These roads were recommended to us through the National Roads Authority through a scientific method using the traffic modeling system, which we invested in heavily so that we understanding the critical situation with traffic, that we didn't waste time trying different things to see what works. They actually have the data there from the traffic modeling system that tells us that this is what we need to do. This is the easiest way at the moment, because we all understand and we all appreciate that to deal with traffic, it requires a holistic approach, but to give some relief immediately, these were the improvements we needed to make. So.
Thank you. Thank you. That's my questions.
Good afternoon, gentlemen and lady. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here once again. I have a few questions, and I'll direct the first one to Mr. Roy to speak on your behalf. Winning is great, but losing is not as good, and it's disappointing sometimes. Have the party gotten over the disappointment season?
For me, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I take these sorts of things in my stride,
Yes.
Ralph, and I recognize it's a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
There are disappointments that come your way.
Yes.
I've also learned very quickly even from the earliest days, that just observing what happens in politics. If you remain in this business long enough, you're going to serve on on both sides
Yes.
of the aisle.
Yes.
And at some point, I felt if I stayed long enough, I'd find myself in opposition.
Okay.
I started that way in 2013 in opposition, quickly found my way on the government bench for the next 8 years.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm a bit philosophical about these things, and I just take things in my stride.
Yeah.
So yeah, disappointing, yes, but we've moved on. I think I can say that for everyone.
Ralph, if I might just comment as the current chairman of the party. Obviously, the loss hurts, especially when everyone, including myself, felt we won 8 seats. It should be a lot really to form the government. I mean, we've negotiated some much more difficult situations than that before. But it is what it is now. And as I said, let's hope the government lasts the full term. But our plan now is to reinvigorate the party. We've already begun that work. We're going to establish constituency councils in each constituency and rebuild the base of the party in that way. So we have a lot of work ahead. We've already planned most of it. For the first time in the party's existence, we have hired a CEO, a chief executive officer who is going to run the party, the administration of the party, and because the politicians obviously have a lot of other obligations as well to constituents and to Parliament. So I think we've got the beginnings of a real plan for a major resurgence of the progressives over the course of this term.
Okay. So back to Mr. McTaggart. So the sour grapes have fallen off the trees.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't know what else to tell you on that one.
That's
We moved on.
No sour
There were
grapes.
no sour grapes here.
It's okay. Okay.
Yeah, no sour
Okay.
grapes here.
Okay.
They outsmarted us this time.
How important is an organized opposition in our democracy?
It is a key element of our democracy, and throughout the Commonwealth and with the Westminster parliamentary system, a strong and effective opposition is absolutely vital to the success of the whole government process. The role of the opposition is to keep the government in check and to influence the direction which they choose to go and the policies that they adopt. We're also there to help to listen to
Find solutions.
pardon?
Find solutions.
Yeah, find solutions
Yes.
to issues that are facing any government and any country, and to make those and to offer those solutions to a government and to to the country as for potential action. And so to me, I view a role as simply trying to keep the government honest and to keep them in check as well.
Okay, can you explain what's the role of the shadow minister? You mentioned the names of the portfolio.
Yes,
what is the role
certainly.
of a shadow minister?
Shadow minister is really role of the shadow minister is to accept certain subject matters which that they will shadow the relevant minister for. In other words, observing what they are doing, what they're offering, again, and being the point person, a person with the knowledge, understanding, and the expertise to be able for the opposition to effectively function and to deal with those issues that are, specific issues in terms of the government. So yes, I bring all the financial expertise into the opposition here. So I'd be the natural shadow minister for the minister to the Minister of Finance, and hopefully be able to interact with him and to offer solutions, offer recommendations for the way forward when it comes to dealing with government's finances. So that really is the work of shadow ministers, and to make sure that the people, and certainly on the opposition side, that we have a repository of the knowledge and experience in those matters.
Right. Just recently, Mr. Hugh was mentioning a number of things that he hoped that the government would continue with. Will the shadow minister be reaching out to offer suggestions? Is that something that will happen, or are you sitting back waiting for them to do something and then say, okay, here's what we would have done? Or are you effectively reaching out just to meet with the individuals in those positions to say, hey.
In time we will do just that.
Okay.
And I mean, the opportunity is there for the shadow ministers to reach out. And I believe that they will probably welcome that gesture from time to time. So that's exactly what I would expect us here to be doing over the next 4 years, and to engage with the government in that directly, in that way. I just give you a case in point right now. I know that the government is due to present a strategic policy statement to the legislature and to the country on, I think the deadline is July 14th.
Right.
And so at this point in time, we are starting to put together our thoughts and making recommendations for policies and issues that could be included and addressed in that document, which will come to the House.
Okay. The next question is for Mr. McLaughlin. For the last two election cycles, the independents got the majority of seats. Is the party system being unpopular? What would you say to that question?
Well, I don't know if I would say it's unpopular. We actually have pretty good data on it because of the surveys we've done, particularly recently. And in certain areas in Grand Cayman in particular, the progressives is still incredibly strong. people tend to vote for the Progressives candidate rather than, for the candidate himself or herself. But there's no question that the party system has faltered, let me use that word, in Cayman, because this UDP or CDP is really non-existent, and as Miller's attempts to get the CIPP off the ground just never happened, despite considerable effort on his part. But our party, I think, is still in a very good place. We have very strong organization. And now that we have time, as we are in the opposition, you're going to see a significant increase in our profile and our presence throughout Cayman. I remain committed to the view that an attempt to form a government with, let's say, use the current case, with 11 independents is almost bound to fail, because each of them have campaigned on different platforms. They haven't spent a great deal of time together to try to come to a consensus on the approach to education, to health, to pensions, to the full range of subjects that we have to grapple with. And when you get into government, from the moment you're sworn in, sometimes even before, the pressures are on you to deliver on this and to deliver on that. And the amount of time that is required to get consensus within your caucus and then your cabinet means that, and I'm telling you, speaking from experience, means that you generally wind up with a very unhappy electorate who say the government isn't doing anything. But government can only move forward when there is consensus on issues. So I wish them well, but I've lived that life before, and as I say, that government lasted 1 year. So best of luck.
So, in a short answer, the party system is not gone; it's still around.
As I say, I don't think there is. You look around all of the countries in the world that have a system of government like ours. You have to have organization, whether you call them a party or a group or a team or whatever. I don't think anything much hangs on what label you give them. What is necessary is cohesiveness. What is necessary is organization. Otherwise, you're going to wind up with, as I expect this is going to happen, this government, you're going to wind up with eight governments. Each ministry going off in its own direction and pursuing the agenda of the minister in charge rather than the agenda of the government.
And you keep saying that we lost the election, but from a PPM perspective, as I said, every PPM member that was in the government was returned to the government. And then
every minister?
Every minister, and every PPM member, including Ms. Conolly and Mr. White. And then, even from the independence perspective, Mr. Seymour was returned, Ms. Rivers retired, and we did lose Mr. Harris. But I can't say that we lost the election. We certainly lost the government, and we were outwitted in that sense. And the lesson we learned from that again is that we have to rebuild the party, and when we go into the next election, that we go into the next election with a very, very strong slate of People Progressive Movement members. And if needed at the end of that, I'm not saying that that's the end of any coalition, because if needed at the end of that, if there are good persons and viable candidates that would like to join forces with us after, then that's always a consideration. But we have to go into the election with a very strong slate of progressive members. And that's the crux of the matter. If we wanted to go back and look at it, as I said earlier, and learn from our mistakes, we should have ran a stronger team of PPM members. Yeah. But I do believe that people out there prefer organized politics. I certainly, as a voter, if I vote for someone, I'd like to know who they will be joining and who will be leading them, because that is just as important as my representative for my area. Because if my representative for the area is not aligned with a strong team, how can they benefit me? How can they benefit my community? How can they benefit the country as a whole? And I do believe that most people if they don't like the PPM, or if they're not, don't want to wear a particular color T-shirt or something, they do believe in organized politics, and they do believe that when they vote for someone, they'd like to know who that person will be aligning themselves with.
Okay. And I have one final question for Mr. Roy. I do believe that the next 6 months is going to be very, very tough for the Cayman Islands when you look at a number of things. And as you mentioned, you're not there to fight against the government. You wish them well, and the opportunity will be there to work with them. And I think, as Mr. Seymour mentioned about not agreeing for the not agreeing purpose. How important do you see the next couple of months are to the Cayman Islands and the recovery? And what's the opposition's position in helping the government to get through it for the country?
Well, that's we've said continuously throughout the campaigns and for many months that the remainder of this year is going to be particularly critical for the Cayman Islands, because we face a number of issues, national issues, that threaten aspects of our country and our economy. The big issues, with the pandemic and the reopening, and the ability of us to get our tourism product back open to the point where we can actually start to receive tourists into Cayman and start to rebuild the industry is going to be a critical element, and the timing of it all important. Tourism is not going to return to the levels it was immediately. It used to be in 2019, at the end of 2019, immediately. Right. It is going to be a process of rebuilding, and that's going to take, in my mind, several years to accomplish. The second element, too, are the issues that we face on the international front with financial services. Those issues and pressures continue to bear heavily on the Cayman Islands, and particularly the government of the day, whoever it is. And so that's a big issue that has to be dealt with if we don't negotiate and we aren't able to achieve the right outcomes for Cayman in any discussions with the EU or the FATF, OECD, whatever the acronym is, and whoever group it is. It could have a very detrimental effect on the industry and on the country as a whole. When you look at something like financial services that represents, 50% in round terms of this country's economy, if you get that affected in any significant way as a result of these international pressures, the effects on the overall country are far more magnified. Financial services contributes significantly to our economy, but they also demand very little in terms of resources and infrastructure to support them. They support themselves. And that, I think, is an element that the general public might not fully realize. They contribute much, but demand little in terms of financial resources. So I think this year is definitely going to be critical for us, and we just need to navigate these things, try and navigate these things in a very thoughtful and well-planned manner, and make sure that we've got the right expertise that's helping us with it, and let's see where we get to.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ms. Conolly, we have yet to hear from you today, so my question is for you. How has this past election and transition to opposition been like from your perspective?
Well, having been the government and been a part of caucus and when I acted as Minister Cabinet, and now having to transition into the opposition, it's a little different for me in that most of these have been in the opposition, so this is my first time experiencing this. I'm hoping that I would be able to still be able to serve my constituents in Georgetown South, because being in government, you have easier access to the departments, to ministers, and this doesn't allow me to. But it's really going to be a little challenging, but at the same time, we are a part of the 19 elected members of Parliament. So I'm hoping that we will still be able to achieve much for our constituencies as a result of just being in opposition. So I'm looking forward to working with the government and also to be able to still achieve what I can for my constituents in Georgetown South.
And Mr. McLaughlin, what mark do you hope to have made as the past Premier of the Cayman Islands?
Well, let me say, history will have to make its judgment about how well or not I did over that 8-year term, but I'm not going to try to say that. I just hope that at the end of my tenure or life, whatever it is, the people of my country that I love so much will simply say, he served well, as best he could. And that's enough for me. I mean, I have been, I'm now starting my 6th term, and I've seen much in terms of political upheaval and controversies and scandals and whatever else you want to say, and been through a lot. But the year of COVID-19 is something I think we will all remember. But never have I felt so, and still feel so, such gratitude of my people everywhere I go, even now. People that I don't know, people that many of them foreigners, expats, simply say, well done, thank you for your leadership over this time. And that, I don't think anything I will ever be able to do again will be able to give me that sense of personal satisfaction. Because hopefully the country will not have to experience, or the world, or something like that again in our lifetime. But yeah, I'll leave it to the critics to make their judgments about me. And often you find with these things that the more distance there is from the events in time, the more objective people tend to become. When you're engaged in politics, most people are on one side or the other, and some think you're a hero and others think you're a villain. That's just how it is. But when you get out of politics or some distance away from it in time, people tend to be a bit more objective and fair. So I hope I live long enough to see that history written.
And this is my final question. With elections, a lot of time people feel it's a time to choose sides, which ultimately they have to do. They have to cast their vote. And sometimes this sense of competition can cause people to lose focus of what the ultimate goal is. Any one of you can chime in. What would you say now that the elections are over should be the ultimate focus for everyone on the Cayman Islands, whoever they voted for made it or not?
Well, since I have the mic, I have to get used to not being the leader, the elections are over. The country has spoken. We have a government in place. As long as they're in place, we all need to support the government. We all need to pull for Team Cayman. Because the people in government are all good, solid Caymanians who care deeply about the country. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stood for public office. So, we can have our political differences, but I think collectively as a country, as a people, we need to continue to pull together. This is still one of the best places in the world in which to live, to work, to raise our families, and we need to do everything we can collectively to keep it that way.
That's it? Okay. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much for attending. We will end things here. I want to thank my colleagues as well for their participation. We do have a copy of the notes that I read, the speech that I made at the outset, so if you'd like to have a copy of it, Mr. Tatum here can let you have it. Just want to say too that we plan to have these on a regular basis going forward to make sure that we keep the press briefed on issues of concern and activities of the opposition over the next 4 years. So you can expect to hear from us on a regular basis. So once again, thank you all and have a good afternoon.